Somewhere deep in the forests of North America, there are stories that continue to survive generation after generation. Stories told by hunters, campers, hikers, truckers, even first responders, and ordinary people who swear they encountered something they still can't explain. Massive footprints, strange vocalizations, heavy movement through the woods, and moments of absolute fear that changed the way they looked at the wilderness forever. And whether people call it Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the forest people, or simply a legend, the stories never really go away. Welcome to Echoes of the Timberline. I'm your host, Eric Martin, and this podcast is dedicated to exploring the mystery surrounding Sasquatch, wilderness encounters, eyewitness reports, and the unexplained experiences that continue to come from deep within the forests and remote places of this country. Now, for this first episode, I wanted to keep things simple. But before we jump into encounter stories, investigations, and interviews, in future episodes, I thought it was important to explain what this podcast is really about and the approach we're going to take moving forward. I have always been fascinated by the unknown. Not because I'm trying to prove something or because I'm looking for attention, but because there's something deeply interesting about the fact that in a world filled with technology, satellites, drones, and cameras, people are still reporting encounters they cannot explain. And what really caught my attention over time wasn't just the stories themselves. It was the consistency. People from completely different backgrounds, different states, different age groups, many of whom have never spoken to each other, often describing very similar experiences. Things like large human-like figures, broad shoulders, massive strides, strange screams or howls, tree knocks, sudden silence in the woods, and an overwhelming feeling of being watched. Now, does that automatically prove Sasquatch exists? No, it doesn't. And this podcast isn't about blindly believing every story that gets posted online. One thing that's important to me is approaching this subject from a grounded and scientific standpoint. That means looking at evidence critically, examining reports carefully, considering natural explanations first, and separating emotional reactions from observable facts whenever possible. We're not here to sensationalize every sound in the woods or claim every blurry photo is proof of Sasquatch. We're going to approach investigations with logic, observation, research, and skeptical criticism. Respectful skepticism. That includes looking at things like environmental conditions, wildlife behavior, witness consistency, geographical patterns, audio analysis, track evidence, and historical data tied to reported encounters. Because let's be honest, if this phenomenon is real in any capacity, then it deserves to be approached seriously and professionally, right? So the purpose of this podcast is simple: to create a respectful place where these encounters and experiences can actually be discussed seriously. Because whether someone believes in Sasquatch or not, many witnesses genuinely believe they experienced something real. I myself had my first experience when I was 2 years old. And now for the past 32 years, I have been studying and researching Bigfoot. And too often people are either immediately mocked or immediately treated as unquestionable proof. And so that's why we are going to look at things genuinely and scientifically and professionally. I don't think either extreme is helpful, though. So the goal of this podcast is to stay balanced, stay curious, stay open-minded, but also grounded in rational thinking and careful investigation. The one thing that I want this show to avoid is unnecessary exaggeration. I'm not interested in fake internet drama, and I'm not interested in turning every unexplained moment into a supernatural story. There are already enough sensationalized stories online. What interests me are the encounters that feel genuine, the stories from experienced outdoorsmen, the witnesses who waited years before telling anyone, the reports that contain details consistent with other encounters across different regions and time periods. In future episodes of this podcast, we're going to cover a wide range of topics connected to the Sasquatch phenomenon. Topics such as eyewitness accounts, historical cases, wilderness audio recordings, famous sightings such as the Patterson-Gimlin film, remote forest locations, Native American legends and oral history, unexplained wilderness experiences, field investigation discussions, and interviews with people willing to share their stories. We'll also be discussing the major theories surrounding the phenomenon itself. Is Sasquatch an undiscovered primate species? Why are certain areas considered hotspots? And why do witnesses across North America continue reporting similar behaviors? These are the kinds of questions we're going to explore together in this podcast. One thing I believe strongly is that spending time in the wilderness changes your perspective. The deeper you get into remote areas, the more you realize how much we still don't know. I go hiking all the time, and I love being out in the woods. And there's always something that I've never discovered before, and it's absolutely amazing. There are places out there where the woods become incredibly quiet. Places where visibility disappears only after a few yards. Places where you suddenly become very aware that humans are not always fully in control of their environment. And whether Sasquatch exists or not, the wilderness itself deserves respect. So in closing, whether you are a believer, a skeptic, an outdoorsman, a researcher, or someone who's simply curious about the mystery of Sasquatch, I appreciate you being here from the very beginning. This podcast is going to explore the unknown with curiosity, professionalism, respect, and a scientific mindset. And this is only the start. My name is Eric, and this has been the pilot episode of Echoes of the Timberline. Keep on squatching.